Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, a potential U.S.-Ukraine weapons deal. President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy meet at the White House, hoping to ride the momentum from the Gaza peace deal. Mario at the White House. Federal authorities arrest a man in Louisiana who is accused of participating in the October 7th Hamas terrorist attack. Meanwhile, Hamas is now using heavy equipment in the Gaza Strip to search for the bodies of deceased hostages. Jason Perry with the details. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton appeared in a Maryland courthouse today to face an 18-count indictment. He said he's not guilty. Arlene Richards has details of the case. The U.S. has conducted 6 strikes against Venezuelan drug trafficking vessels, which the White House says were carrying over 100,000 lethal doses of drugs. Democratic lawmakers say there's no justification for the strikes and are now seeking to restrict the operations. The president is asking the Supreme Court to allow National Guard deployment in Chicago. That's after a lower court order blocked the move for at least 2 weeks. How the court responded. And millions are expected to participate in No Kings protests around the country on Saturday, according to the event's organizers. Jason Blair has a preview and what lawmakers are saying.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump welcomes Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the White House after Trump's 2.5-hour call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The leaders floating a weapons deal and riding momentum from the Gaza ceasefire to get peace for Ukraine. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mario at the White House. Good evening, Mari. What is the latest from Zelenskyy's visit?
Tiff, good evening. Yes, after their visit in the cabinet meeting, in the cabinet room today, President Trump is calling for an immediate end to the war in Ukraine, saying that if it ends along its current lines, both Russia and Ukraine can declare victory. President Trump and President Zelenskyy are saying that this meeting is different than the others because it comes on the heels of the Gaza ceasefire. Take a look.
Do you think you can carry the momentum from the Middle East deal over to this deal? And
I do.
So, how does that move the needle?
Yeah, I do. I think we carry a lot of momentum, a lot of credibility. Getting Middle East done was very important.
Congratulations with your successful ceasefire in the Middle East. And I think this is the momentum to finish Russia's war against Ukraine.
President Zelenskyy proposes that Ukraine would provide the U.S. with its advanced drones in exchange for the U.S.'s long-range Tomahawk missiles. The atmosphere of the meeting, this time in the cabinet room, notably different from when the two leaders were in the Oval in February.
And I think it looks beautiful in his jacket.
Yeah?
It's beautiful. I hope people notice. It's actually very stylish. I like it.
In recent days, President Trump has said he's open to selling Ukraine the Tomahawks, but after Thursday's call with President Putin, he softens his posture.
Would much rather have them not need Tomahawks. Would much rather have the war be over.
President Trump says he's expecting to meet Putin in Budapest, Hungary.
It's a country that's a safe country that will be going to be with Viktor Orban, and I think he'll be a very good host.
And that the meeting format is to be determined, but
it'll be a double meeting, but we will have the president, Zelenskyy, in touch. There's a lot of bad blood with the two presidents.
And as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says he thinks trade tensions have de-escalated with China, President Trump still floats imposing higher tariffs on China after Beijing expanded its export controls on rare earths last week.
As of November 1st, I could move it up if I wanted. A 100% tariff over and above what we get now. So that would make it about 157%. And China doesn't want that, and they want to talk.
President Trump said that he's expected to meet with Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping as expected in South Korea in 2 weeks. Tiff, back to you.
All right, Mari, thanks for those updates. As Trump and Zelenskyy discussed, Tomahawk missiles is the weaponry that the U.S. is selling to the EU for Ukraine, making a dent in our own military readiness. Hear from retired Navy SEAL Mike Storelli tonight on Capitol Report at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Russia confirms that President Vladimir Putin has agreed to meet with President Trump, possibly within the next 2 weeks. But there are many questions on how Putin can get to Hungary, where the summit is scheduled to take place. NTD's international correspondent Arian Polstar has more.
President Trump on Thursday said that he agreed to a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, but Trump gave no date for the summit. Now on Friday, a spokesman for the Kremlin confirmed the plans, saying the meeting might take place soon.
The meeting could indeed take place within 2 weeks or slightly later. There is a shared understanding that it should not be put off.
The summit is scheduled to take place in Hungary, which is surrounded by EU member states. If Putin wants to travel there through the northern route, the plane has to fly above Poland and Slovakia. In case of the southern route, it would have to fly over Bulgaria.
The obstacles here are the EU ban on Russian aircraft in EU airspace. A decision will need to be made at either the EU level or the national level to allow a flight if that is where they're going to meet.
The Kremlin was asked which route Putin is expected to use when traveling to Hungary.
For now, of course, it is not clear. The foreign ministers of Russia and the U.S. will first hold a call and meet to begin discussing the topic and all related issues.
It's not clear yet if the European Union plans to grant Putin special permission to fly in EU territory to get to Hungary. But a spokesman for the EU Commission says the bloc supports the meeting.
First, to repeat that any meeting that moves forward the process of achieving a just and lasting peace for Ukraine is welcome.
Meanwhile, in other Russia-related news, an update on a man suspected of damaging the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines. A Ukrainian man identified only as Volodymyr Z is accused of being involved in the pipeline explosions. A Polish court has now ruled against handing him over to German authorities, who first issued the arrest warrant against him. Here is the judge explaining the decision.
No one operating within the armed forces of Ukraine can be considered a terrorist or a saboteur. By pursuing the goal of defending their homeland by all means possible, they weaken the enemy.
The judge has ordered Volodymyr Z to be released from custody. His lawyers say they welcome the ruling. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Federal authorities have arrested a man in Louisiana accused of participating in the October 7th Hamas terrorist attack. Meanwhile, members of Hamas are using heavy equipment in the Gaza Strip to search for the bodies of deceased hostages. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
On Friday, the U.S. Department of Justice said they arrested a Palestinian man in Louisiana. The 33-year-old man's name is Mahmoud al-Muhtadi, and he's from the Gaza Strip, and he's accused of participating in the Hamas terrorist attack on October 7th, 2023. According to court documents, al-Muhtadi is an operative for the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine's military wing, which is a Gaza-based paramilitary group that participated in the October 7th Hamas terrorist attack against Israel. On the morning of the attack, al-Muhtadi allegedly learned of the attack, then gathered others and crossed into Israel with the intention of assisting Hamas in the attack. Al-Muhtadi's phone utilized a cell phone tower near a community in Israel that was attacked on that day. He's also accused of lying on his U.S. visa application, where he denied his involvement with a paramilitary organization and his connection to Hamas. Al-Muhtadi could face up to 20 years in prison if convicted of providing material support to a foreign terrorist organization, and additional time if convicted of visa fraud. Members of the Hamas terrorist group in the Gaza Strip will receive amnesty if they lay down their weapons and return all the hostages. On Friday, a Hamas terrorist stood guard while others were seen using heavy equipment to search for the bodies of the remaining 19 deceased hostages. Hamas says it will return the body of another hostage on Friday night. And Israel so far has handed over the bodies of 90 Palestinians to the Gaza Strip for burial. However, a local doctor said it was difficult to identify them.
In terms of identifying and confirming the bodies, we try in all ways, but our means are primitive, and we rely on identifying them through the relatives only, not through scientific means. We do not have DNA or equipment or specialized examinations or laboratories.
Everyone is saying, this is my son, and we do not know. I hope they would communicate with the Israeli army so they can tell us their names.
Meanwhile, in Israel, a crowd welcomed newly released hostage Omri Miran as he returned home for the first time since the Hamas terrorist attack.
First of all, I am excited from all this support and love, the help given to my family and all. And to be honest, I am here. All who were released until today are also here. But there are still other people there. Still there are families who didn't close the circle.
Jason Perry, NTD News.
John Bolton, President Trump's former national security advisor turned adversary, pleaded not guilty today to 18 counts of illegally sharing and retaining classified information. NTD's Arlene Richards has the details.
One day after the Justice Department charged him with 18 counts, former national security advisor John Bolton pleaded not guilty in a court proceeding on Friday. A federal grand jury determined on Thursday that there was enough evidence presented by the Justice Department to bring criminal charges. The charges of unlawful handling of classified information are the result of an investigation that revealed Bolton had used a private AOL email to store and transmit classified notes during his 2018 to 2019 White House tenure in the first Trump administration. In August 2025, the FBI conducted a search on Bolton's Bethesda home and Washington office where agents seized devices and documents marked secret or confidential, including materials on weapons of mass destruction. The indictment states that Bolton shared more than 1,000 pages of information about his day-to-day activities as the National Security Advisor, including information relating to the national defense. It further states that this information was classified up to the top secret level. Bolton's attorney, Abby Lowell, told the Associated Press that keeping a diary is not a crime. He said Bolton kept personal diaries over his 45-year career, records that are unclassified, shared only with his immediate family and known to the FBI as far back as 2021. Bolton faces $250,000 in fines and 10 years in prison for each count. For now, he's not permitted to travel abroad without court approval. He has surrendered all of his travel documents, including his passport. The court is expected to hold a status hearing on November 21st. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Congressional Democrats are seeking to restrict the Trump administration's operations against foreign terrorist organizations led by the Venezuelan regime in the South Caribbean Sea. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, has more on the story.
Democrats in the House and the Senate have now submitted resolutions to stop the Trump administration from continuing strikes against foreign terrorist organizations smuggling drugs in the South Caribbean Sea.
Congress should be having hearings, literally right now. There's no reason we can't do it, and demand to know what the facts are, as well as also urging that the War Powers Act be implemented in those factual situations.
The White House has briefed the Armed Services and Intelligence Committee in both the House and the Senate on the strikes, but Democratic lawmakers who were not part of those classified briefings insist that they are illegal.
I rise today to denounce the Trump administration's reckless and illegal military escalation in the Caribbean. That is why I am introducing a resolution to terminate hostilities against Venezuela and against the transnational criminal organizations.
The government of the Dominican Republic has recovered thousands of kilos of cocaine from U.S.-destroyed vessels in the South Caribbean Sea. But Democratic lawmakers insist that the Trump administration needs to provide more evidence for the legality of these strikes.
Maduro is the head of the Cartel de los Soles. The Cartel de los Soles is responsible for the deaths of hundreds and tens of thousands of Americans. We need to protect the American people. These cartels are killing Americans every single day, and the number one job of government is to protect its citizens.
The U.S. has conducted a total of 6 strikes thus far, neutralizing 27 cartel members and stopping approximately 100,000 lethal doses of drugs from being smuggled into the U.S. Reports indicate that a strike conducted this Thursday left survivors that were recovered by U.S. military personnel.
The President of the United States is doing exactly what he should be doing. He's the commander-in-chief. When he sees an invasion coming against the United States, he takes action. He's a leader. He should take that action. I support him 100%.
The Senate will vote on a resolution submitted by Senator Tim Kaine to try and stop the Trump administration from continuing strikes against foreign terrorist organizations in the South Caribbean Sea. Similar legislation introduced in the House and the Senate in the past month have failed. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
The country is bracing for nationwide No Kings protests on Saturday, which the organizer says will number in the thousands. Some elected officials are speaking in support of the protests, while others are voicing criticism. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more.
The organizer for the No Kings protest says that millions are expected to turn out on Saturday to over 2,600 events.
No Kings is back. And over the past few months, thousands of people have organized once again in their communities, on the ground locally, volunteering to bring their neighbors, families, and friends together to say unequivocally, we have no kings.
Epstein Ortiz is calling it the, quote, largest single-day protest in modern history. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries voices his approval.
I support the right of every single American to participate in the rallies that are going to take place this week. And showing up to express dissent against an out-of-control administration.
However, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson sees the rallies differently.
We refer to it by its more accurate description, the Hate America rally, okay? And I'm not sure how anybody can refute that.
And in Texas, Governor Greg Abbott announced on Thursday that he's deployed Texas National Guard into Austin ahead of what he calls, quote, Antifa-linked protests. Abbott says Texas will not tolerate chaos. Anyone destroying property or committing acts of violence will be swiftly arrested. Here in Washington, D.C., organizers are expecting over 100,000 people on Saturday. And large-scale Turning Point USA events continue to happen around the country. 6,000 people honored Charlie Kirk at an event on Thursday in Oklahoma. Speaking at the event were Russell Brand and the Oklahoma governor. And later this month, on October 29th, Erica Kirk, along with Vice President J.D. Vance, will headline a Turning Point USA event at the University of Mississippi. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
The Trump administration today asked the Supreme Court to allow the deployment of National Guard troops in the Chicago area. In the emergency appeal to the High Court, the administration is hoping to unblock a lower court's order that prevents deployment for at least 2 weeks. A federal appeals court on Thursday refused to put the judge's order on hold. The Justice Department wrote in the new filing that federal agents have repeatedly been threatened and assaulted in Chicago, where an immigration facility is located. But both lower courts disagreed, saying there was no credible evidence of violence. The Supreme Court has asked Illinois and Chicago to respond by 5 p.m. Monday. In Chicago, dozens of protesters are currently occupying an area outside the Broadview ICE Detention Center. NTD's Chris Bob is there. Good evening, Chris. What is the situation like on the ground right now?
Right now, I'm outside of the Broadview Center in Chicago at the intersections of Lexington and Beach Streets, where there's a designated protest area. There are signs around encouraging protesters not to protest outside of this designated area. There's about 60 that I counted types of different protesters. Some you see Operation Inflation in full force. There are protesters dressed in frog costumes, unicorn costumes, rooster costumes. I saw a dinosaur as well. A little earlier, we also saw a couple individuals in black bloc, which is a type of dress where you wear all black, including a face covering. Then there are also some protesters carrying different flags, some U.S. flags, some Mexican flags. I think the last type is a legal observer who is also here from the National Lawyers Guild, who is watching over the protesters and trying to see if there's any clash between law enforcement and those demonstrating outside of the detention center. There was one Trump supporter here. He was carrying, I guess you can call him a counter-protester. He was carrying a Blue Lives Matter flag, and he got into a little bit of a spat with some of the protesters here, but it was de-escalated by one of our protesters in the frog uniform.
And Chris, how are local authorities managing the area?
There were a number of arrests earlier in the day. Initial reports say 11, and folks on the ground are attributing that to the fact that protests were supposed to commence at 9 o'clock in the morning, and some arrived earlier. We don't yet know if that is the total reason why they were arrested, but that's what we hear so far. No arrests have taken place since that initial incident. If you can tell, behind me, there's the concrete barriers set up. Protesters are corralled basically into a pretty small area. Probably could accommodate a couple hundred, but you have about 60 there. So far, everything is kind of calm, except for that one spat that took place earlier. There's a curfew that's about to take place in about 40 minutes. And at 6 o'clock local time here, all of the protesters are going to be asked to disperse, and we're going to see if they do so. There have been some confrontations previously where protesters have refused to leave, and the Illinois State Police or other law enforcement agencies will come out and encourage them with batons and otherwise to exit the area. Back to you, Tiffany.
All right, Chris, thanks for that, and stay safe out there. Protesters today are also gathering outside of D.C.'s Lincoln Memorial for a rally ahead of the nationwide No Kings demonstrations. NTD's Sam Wong was out there to find out what the people had to say.
What are your thoughts on this No Kings protests that are popping up across the country? Is President Trump a king?
Absolutely not. And these people that are saying it, they're just talking points at this point, and they want something to fight against. So if they actually read their history and came here and actually understood what was going on, maybe they would actually have a different opinion of things.
Tell us a little bit more about your messaging here, No Kings. What's that all about?
All the power, slowly but surely, is moving to the executive, and inside the executive to Trump in particular, Trump and his corrupt cronies. The Democrats need leadership. They need somebody to run in 2028 who counts. Jasmine Crockett is a perfect example. I like Gavin Newsom.
It's just a narrative. Trump sucks. Well, what do you think about Washington, D.C.'s crime problem? Well, Trump sucks. Well, what do you think about Colorado? The Colorado River is turning black. Oh, Trump sucks. Whatever it is, Trump sucks. That's all they have.
Is President Trump a king?
Is he a king? In his own mind, I think sometimes he is. But he's not a king of us. I don't think Trump's here to make friends, okay? I think he's here to do a job. Okay, and the job is to get this country back on the right track, which was for the first 150 years.
We are here in stark opposition to the felon deploying National Guard and use them as props. So as long as the Guard are here in D.C., we will be here as well.
What do you make of the messaging here, No Kings?
I think it's ridiculous.
It's a deception.
It is. It's evil. It's not true.
When for decades, when no one bothered to uphold the laws, no one said a thing, and now that somebody's standing up and doing what the American citizens voted him to do, was to go in there. We want our laws enforced. We don't want crime like this. We don't want our border opened. And now that he's just doing what's already part of the law of the structure of this country, they're treating it like there's something wrong with that.
Coming up, hackers have reportedly doxed hundreds of members of federal law enforcement, including employees of DOJ, the FBI, and ICE. David Lamb reports. In candidates race to be the next mayor of New York City, President Trump, crime, Hamas, and prostitution were just a few of the topics at last night's lively debate. A review of the highlights when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A new report says that hackers are doxing members of federal law enforcement. This comes as the Department of Homeland Security says Mexican cartels are putting bounties on ICE agents. NTD's David Lamb has more.
404 Media reports that a group of hackers has posted the personal information of hundreds of federal law enforcement officials. The doxed information reportedly includes data on people working for the Department of Homeland Security and ICE. The hackers are allegedly from a group known as the COM, which has been behind several data breaches in recent years. This comes as masked federal agents are carrying out immigration raids across U.S. cities. This recent leak allegedly exposed the personal information of around 700 Homeland Security employees and around 200 DOJ officials, and the emails of 170 FBI employees. One hacker reportedly asked whether people want the IRS to be their next target. The hackers reportedly used Telegram and said they want the bounty offered by Mexican cartels. This week, the Department of Homeland Security said cartels have issued bounties in exchange for information or criminal acts against federal agents and officials. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem previously said the U.S. will not back down from the threats and that every criminal, terrorist, and illegal alien will face American justice. NTD reached out to Homeland Security and the FBI for comments on the doxed information, but didn't hear back before broadcast time. David Lamb, NTD News.
The first televised debate for the candidates to be mayor of New York took place last night. NTD's Daniel Monahan has key takeaways from the lively face-off between former Governor Andrew Cuomo, Democrat Zohran Mamdani, and Republican Curtis Sliwa.
Former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo took aim at Zohran Mamdani's experience.
I have the experience of having served in the New York State Assembly for 5 years and watching a broken political system, the experience of seeing a governor in Andrew Cuomo who would rather have served his billionaire donors and the working class New Yorkers who voted for him.
This is not a job for someone who has no management experience to run 300,000 people, no financial experience to run $115 billion budget. He literally has never had a job. On his resume, it says he interned for his mother.
Thank God I'm not a professional politician. We have the architect and we have the apprentice of no cash bail, which has been a disaster. We have the architect and the apprentice here of Raise the Age. My own son was almost killed because of that in a gang attack.
On failing to call for Hamas to lay down their arms, Mamdani said this.
Of course, I believe that they should lay down their arms. I'm proud to be one of the first elected officials in this state who called for a ceasefire. I'm hopeful that it is just. And for it to be just, we also have to ensure that it addresses the conditions that preceded this, conditions like occupation, like the siege, and apartheid.
The assemblyman will not denounce Hamas. The assemblyman will not denounce Hassan Piker, who said America deserved 9/11. The assemblyman just said in his response, well, it depends on occupation. That is code, meaning that Israel does not have a right to exist as a Jewish state.
The candidates also discussed the deployment of federal agents to handle crime.
When Donald Trump sent ICE agents on people in Los Angeles, Andrew Cuomo said that New Yorkers need not overreact. That is the furthest answer that New Yorkers are looking for.
I went through this with him. He sent the National Guard to 20 cities when I was governor. You know what city he didn't send them to? New York. Why? Because I said to him, don't you dare.
On protests, Sliwa says civil disobedience has its limits.
We have rampaging groups that go running through the streets, that enter all kinds of facilities and violate other people's rights. And there's no one who's willing to stop it.
On crime, the candidates had this to say.
We will have dedicated teams of mental health outreach workers in the top 100 subway stations with the highest levels of the mental health crisis and homelessness.
The NYPD is now down at one of the lowest levels in modern political history. I would add 5,000 police, put 1,500 in the subways.
The mayoral hopefuls also touched on the cost of living.
We'll freeze the rent for more than 2 million rent-stabilized tenants, and I will also build 200,000 truly affordable homes.
Freeze the rent only postpones the rent, because then you have to have an increase to cover the costs.
We have 6,000 available apartments that a mayor controls in NYCHA, and they've been empty for years. That you address, number one. Then we talk about senior citizens who are living here. My whole goal is to improve and not to move. I'm concerned about the seniors, especially those that own homes. If they're 65 and make less than $250,000, no property tax, because the property tax is way too high. We need to cut it in half to keep people who are here. And then in terms of rentals, we have affordable housing that can be built in these huge skyscrapers. You see them all throughout Manhattan and in northern Brooklyn and in Long Island City, which we have 25 Empire State Buildings full of commercial space that will never be occupied for office space. We should be converting them into affordable apartments.
And discuss the sex trade and its consequences on the streets.
Prosecuting women for prostitution is something that actually leads to less safety. And what we need to do is provide an economy of opportunity.
You don't go after the women. The women are the victims here. You lock up the Johns, you shame the Johns.
The election is now just 2 weeks away on November 4th. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Coming up, Tomahawk missiles take center stage in President Trump's meeting with the Ukrainian president. A national security analyst joins us to unpack their meeting and explain just how important these missiles are. And the Chinese Communist Party expels 9 of its high-ranking officials. All of them are deemed part of party leader Xi Jinping's faction. Could the Chinese leader's grip on power be slipping? Jack Bradley reports after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump meets with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the White House to discuss the war with Russia. What can we take away from the meeting? Rebecca Grant, Vice President at Lexington Institute and National Security Analyst, joins us for analysis. Rebecca, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Now, after the meeting, President Trump published a post on Truth Social saying enough blood has been shed with property lines being defined by war and guts. They should stop where they are. Let both claim victory. Let history decide. What are your thoughts on this message from the president?
President Trump is as committed as ever to try to get peace for Ukraine. During the pre-lunch session, he called himself sort of the mediator in chief, the one who wants to mediate between Russia and Ukraine. Of course, the problem is getting Putin to talk. And here, Trump is playing out a very clever strategy, inviting Zelenskyy to the White House for talks, and then talking again and again about the possibility of TLAMs, the Tomahawk long-range cruise missile, perhaps going to Ukraine. All this is setting the stage for talks next week with Secretary Rubio and Russian counterparts, and then maybe leading to a summit that President Trump would attend in Budapest with Putin.
Now, as you mentioned, Tomahawk missiles were a big part of the talks, but President Trump added, quote, "We don't want to be giving away things that we need to protect our country." Russia has warned against the U.S. giving Ukraine Tomahawks, saying that would be an escalation. First, though, talk to us about why the focus on Tomahawks. Could these missiles actually change the trajectory of war if Ukraine had them?
Oh, yes. They have a range of about 1,000 miles or more. They are very precise. And they've really been an incredible precision strike weapon of choice. They were developed in the Cold War, but used in the Iraqi war, used against Syria, used just this summer to hit some of the targets in Iran's nuclear weapons complex. So what's happening in Ukraine is Ukraine has started to use drones to hit military targets and energy targets inside Russia in retaliation for the brutal escalation by Putin. Add Tomahawks to that mix, and that's an incredibly powerful weapon that could seriously damage Russian oil and gas production, and yet do so in a way that would be very precise and without unwanted collateral damage and civilian casualties. So also, it shows a huge support from the United States to Ukraine. And to my mind, this is really bothering Putin. I think this is why Putin has reached out to talk with Trump. And the idea for Putin of having TLAMs in the air over Russia is really intolerable. And this is putting, I think, a lot of good pressure on Putin to negotiate towards a ceasefire.
Now, President Trump today also saying, quote, "Hopefully we'll be able to get the war over without thinking about Tomahawks." I think we're fairly close to that. How close do you think we are to that?
Oh, if only we knew. And, when you really watch what he says on the one hand, well, we hope we don't have to use the tomahawks, and I hope we don't have to use the tomahawks. He talks about them over and over and over. And to me, this is a very pointed attempt to communicate to Putin that he is very willing to give tomahawks to Ukraine if necessary. And just the mere presence of tomahawks in Ukraine would pose a huge air defense problem for Russia and may be able to give Ukraine some of the deterrence that's missing right now. How close are we? President Trump seems to think it is inching closer. We're really trying to get Putin just to agree to a ceasefire, which he so far has managed not to do. And it would be so great to see a ceasefire there.
And on that point, the Gaza peace plan came up with Zelenskyy saying because of that success, quote, President Trump has a big chance now to finish this war. And you also had Russia's Putin commending Trump for that in the call yesterday. What role, if anything, could this play in negotiations here?
Well, I think there's no question that Trump has incredible momentum from the Gaza ceasefire. It's only a few days ago. And it's true. No one thought it could be done. There was despair about the situation, and now the living hostages have come back, and there is a ceasefire. They're going to be tense moments, but basically Trump pulled off an incredible diplomatic coup and has probably set the Middle East on a path towards a much better place and the hope for Gaza, reconstruction for Gaza. So you want to see all of that then go and happen with Ukraine. And I think partly it's a matter of saying, yes, American leadership is back. Trump is exercising global leadership. And, Putin had really better be thinking about where this leaves him. He's got China as his big major ally, but Russia is really getting left behind economically. The war is devastating for Russia as well. And if Putin had any sense, he would be thinking seriously about a ceasefire. The question is, we don't know what's going on in Putin's head other than worrying about the tomahawks.
Well, Rebecca Grant, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
A major shakeup inside the Chinese Communist Party. CCP leader Xi Jinping's closest allies, some of the most powerful men in the party, have been stripped of their ranks and handed over for investigation. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
The Chinese Communist Party has expelled 9 top military leaders, including 2 generals who were widely considered to be CCP leader Xi Jinping's right-hand men. The most senior figure here, He Weidong, was the vice chairman of the Central Military Commission. He was stripped of his party membership and removed from the People's Liberation Army. Another longtime ally of Xi that was purged is Miao Hua. He oversaw the military's political loyalty department until his sudden suspension last year, now expulsion. All 9 men have been removed from the military and their cases handed to prosecutors. And China's defense ministry says that the expulsions are part of an anti-corruption campaign started by Xi Jinping himself back in 2012. But now, the sweep appears to be turning inward, targeting Xi's own inner circle. The CCP is made up of different factions, with party infighting very prevalent. Over the past week, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says a lower-level CCP official may have been working to undermine Xi Jinping's power by issuing rare earth export restrictions.
There was a lower-level trade person who was slightly unhinged here in August. I think his name is Li Guangdong, and threatening, saying that China would unleash chaos on the global system if the U.S. went ahead with our docking fees for Chinese ships. The Chinese system is quite brittle, so this may not have come from Xi Jinping himself. This may have come from a Chinese hardliner. They have hardliners on their side too, who are always trying to undermine the relationship.
The official he's referring to here is Li Chenggang, China's Vice Minister of Commerce. He's widely viewed as belonging to Xi's opposition faction, which is led by former CCP leader Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao. The purge of these officers comes just days before a key Communist Party meeting where leaders will discuss China's next 5-year plan and possible leadership changes. It was at one of these events back in 2022 when Hu Jintao was removed from the meeting by 2 guards. Whether this purge will lead to a shift in political power remains unclear, but with Xi's own allies now under investigation, China's most powerful leader could be feeling the pressure. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Coming up in baseball, the Dodgers are on the verge of a sweep after another dominant pitching performance last night. Dave Martin joins us to discuss. And federal prosecutors say 2 Southern California developers misused millions in state funds meant to combat homelessness. Now both are facing serious federal charges. Christina Corona has the details when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Department of Justice has announced charges against 2 California real estate executives accused of misusing millions in state funds meant to combat homelessness. Authorities say the cases mark the start of a wider crackdown on homelessness fraud. Christina Corona tells us more.
Federal prosecutors announced 2 criminal cases against separate California real estate developers accused of misusing millions in state funds meant to combat homelessness. Stephen Taylor, 44, is facing multiple counts, including bank fraud, identity theft, and money laundering in connection with the Los Angeles property he sold to a nonprofit using state Home Key funds. Home Key is California's program that provides funding to purchase and convert properties into housing for people experiencing homelessness. Acting United States Attorney Bill Asaley said at a press conference Thursday that in December 2023,
Taylor misleadingly told the lender he intended to renovate and use a property in the affluent community of Cheviot Hills for himself. In truth, Taylor had already contracted to sell the property, which he acquired for only $11 million fraudulently, to Weingard, a homeless housing developer that purchased the property for a whopping $27 million.
DOJ says that transaction was hidden from the victim lender and others. Taylor is accused of secretly selling the property for a $16 million profit. In a separate case, Cody Holmes, 31, the former CFO of Beverly Hills-based Shangri-La Industries, was arrested for allegedly using Home Key funds to pay personal expenses, including luxury credit card bills totaling over $2 million.
Holmes and Shangri-La knowingly submitted fake bank statements which claimed to show that the developer had about $160 million on deposit. Not only were the bank statements fake, our investigation shows that Shangri-La and its affiliates had nowhere near the amount of money they claimed they had in the fake bank statements.
The state paid nearly $26 million to the developer to fund a project in Thousand Oaks, but construction was never completed.
In both of these cases, defendants took advantage of funds allocated to assist some of the most vulnerable people in society who are already without a home, some of whom may be suffering from a myriad of conditions.
If convicted, Cody Holmes could face up to 20 years in prison, while Stephen Taylor could receive more than 30 years, including a mandatory 2-year term for identity theft. Asaley says that his task force will continue investigating how billions in taxpayer dollars meant to fight homelessness are being spent. Christina Corona, NTD News.
And now for your sports news, which are by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on right now. But let's start in baseball's playoffs, as right now, Game 5 of the ALCS is already in action between Toronto and Seattle. What's the latest here?
Yeah, right now, the latest I saw, Mariners were up 1-0 in the second inning thanks to a solo home run from Eugenio Suarez. So that's where we're at right now. Now, last night, the Blue Jays won 8-2 here to take back the home field advantage. Not that it's actually mattered in this series. I mean, the road team has won all 4 games thus far. But also, Vlad Guerrero Jr. hit yet another home run. That is his 5th of these playoffs in just 8 total games, and he's having a monster postseason. But no matter which team wins tonight, they'll head back to Toronto for Game 6 on Sunday. Game 7, if necessary, would be Monday, and that would also be in Toronto. So advantage Jays in that case anyway.
All right, well, meanwhile, in the NLCS, things aren't looking good for Milwaukee as they now trail 3-0.
Yeah, not looking good for the Brewers here. In the history of baseball, 42 teams have won the first 3 games of a best-of-7 series. 31 of those times, it's ended up being a sweep. Only 4 times has as a team won 2 more games just to force a Game 6. And only one team ever ended up coming back from 3-0 deficit to win. That was the Red Sox back in the 2004 ALCS. So the Brewers have a very tall task on their hands. They've definitely had trouble scoring runs in this series. Just one game, 1 run each in games 1, 2, and 3. They're hitting a collective 101 as a team right now against the Dodgers. Now, tonight, they're going to go up against Shohei Ohtani on the mound. Now, pitching-wise, he's made 1 start this postseason. That was against the Phillies in the last round, went 6 innings, gave up 3 runs, so at least he was a solid there. Brewers, meanwhile, will start Jose Quintana. Game starts at 8:30 Eastern Time, and it'll be in L.A.
All right, well, shifting gears to college football, we have another full slate of games this weekend. Which matchups stand out to you?
Well, I found 5 games where both teams are ranked, so I'm looking at this one. We're going to start with 10th ranked LSU is playing at number 17 Vanderbilt. Commodores are coming off that close loss to Alabama. I think they were very much respected for it, though. Only dropped from number 16 to 17th in the poll. So that game tomorrow, LSU at Vanderbilt, is at noon Eastern Time. Then at 3:30, we got another big one in the SEC. Number 5, Ole Miss is at 9th ranked Georgia. Ole Miss is tied for the SEC lead at 3-0. Bulldogs, though, are 7.5-point favorites in this one. Then at 7:30 in the evening, another big SEC battle. Number 6, Alabama is hosting 11th ranked Tennessee. Crimson Tide are tied with Ole Miss for the SEC lead at 3-0. Vols, meanwhile, their only loss was to Georgia in overtime a few weeks ago. And then we got in the evening tomorrow elsewhere. Number 20, USC is at 13th ranked Notre Dame. Trojans beat Michigan last week. Irish, meanwhile, won 4 straight since those close losses to Miami and Texas A&M to start the season. Later on that night, then, we've got 23rd ranked Utah at 15th ranked BYU. That game starts at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Got all that?
I hope our viewers are taking notes. Looking at the NFL.
I'll be quizzing you later.
All right. Well, looking at the NFL schedule on Sunday, the Minnesota Vikings face the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. What is the status of quarterback J.J. McCarthy, though?
Well, he has returned to practice, but he will not be starting. The Vikings will go ahead and go with Carson Wentz for the 4th straight game. McCarthy has been out with that ankle sprain. Now, a number of star players, of course, could be out for this weekend's games. The Jets have listed wide receiver Garrett Wilson is doubtful for the Panthers with a knee injury. Also, Patriots receiver Stephon Diggs is listed as questionable with a chest injury. His brother, meanwhile, Cowboys cornerback Trayvon Diggs, listed as out with a concussion for the game against Washington. The Commanders wide receiver Terry McLaurin, he has a quad injury. He's listed as out. The Cardinals, meanwhile, quarterback Kyler Murray, questionable with a foot injury. And finally, the San Francisco 49ers have listed Brock Purdy and wide receiver Ricky Pearsall as out for their game against the Falcons there. So FYI for your fantasy football team, I hope you got all that. I listed a whole bunch down here. I hope I got them all right. Commanders will be without, yes, they will be without McLaurin. That's the one I wasn't quite sure about. McLaurin is on like all my teams, and he's been out for a while, so I know that one well.
All right, well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. Round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.